to begin. Obviously, this, everybody, is Mr. David Levy from William Morris Endeavour, one of the biggest talent agencies in the world, not just for music, but entertainment overall. I think it's pretty clear that I think a lot of people feel that David Levy is one of the most feared agents in the world, but I think what I want to get across today is that he's also one of the most revered. I think that's a very important thing that we want to get out of this, and I think when you hear the history of David's career, you'll start to realise why. I do also want to say that despite reputation, he was the easiest booking of the IMS so far. He didn't ask for a flight, he didn't ask for a hotel, and to be honest, he sold more tickets than anybody else at the conference. He didn't ask for headline billing, so I have to say he's not as bad as people think.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks.
So David, take us back. I'm really curious and fascinated to know about how you got into this scene. You're the first DJ agent, along with Maria May, that I ever met back in Covent Garden in a little street called Floral Street, and I was about 18 years of age. But you go back way much more than that.
Yeah, I actually did DJ at college, not very well, but I was a social secretary at college, organising gigs and running a weekly party. And towards the end of my college years, I rang a few agencies because someone had said, you know, if you want to do well in the music business, be an agent. They're in the middle of everything. Very wise words, actually. So I went for various interviews, and I ended up taking a job at an agency called Concord for a guy called Louis Parker. I now work with his son, Solomon. And Louis paid me for 5 days a week. He paid me for 3 days, but I had to work 5 days a week to earn 20 quid a day. So it was pretty raw financially. But I got to learn a lot about clubs because Louis was in the middle of sort of that Stringfellows Hippodrome era. He was best mates with Peter Stringfellow, and I got dragged all over London to all these places, after-hours clubs, all sorts of stuff. It was a bit of an eye-opener. But I didn't last very long there. Didn't like the abuse. So I left, and I ended up starting an agency with a big leisure chain called Mecca, working for a guy called Albert Samuel. And one day he called me in and he said, does this name Marshall Jefferson mean anything to you? And I said, no, never heard of him. He said, well, I've just had a phone call from a guy, a PR guy. Would you have a look into it, would you? So I grew up in Nottingham, and Rock City in Nottingham was a club that I used to go to every weekend. I was friendly with the DJ there. I rang him up, and he said, Marshall Jefferson? Yes. And I was like, oh, really? And he said, who else? I said, well, there's this Fingers Inc., some guy called Larry Hurd, some guy called Robert Owens, another guy called Adonis, and the funniest one, Frankie Knuckles, as if that's his real name. So Jonathan said, I'll have it. I'll definitely do it. And you want to call this guy in Manchester? I'll give you his number. His name's Mike Pickering. And it sort of started like that. And that was in the mid-'80s. And I started working with Cold Cut and Louis Vega before he met Kenny. All sorts of DJs in that era. And at the time, no one really believed that a DJ could be a show. In fact, the early Chicago tour, that tour with Marshall Jefferson, they all turned up wearing batwing suits, and it was very much a PA. They didn't really DJ. They sort of sang to a tape, which is what people did in those days. So it was an interesting beginning.
And the Marshall Jefferson thing is interesting because I understand that he went back to Chicago and told everybody about you. Is that correct?
Yeah. Halfway through the tour, a guy called Larry Sherman, who'd organised the tour, I found out that he was collecting the money but wasn't actually passing it on to the acts. Because Marshall rang me up and he's like, hey man, you know, how come we're not getting paid? And I'm like, no, you're getting paid. He's like, no, we're not. So I rang this guy, Larry Sherman, and he's like, it's none of your business. And I'm like, this isn't Chicago, mate. You know, it's London. And I worked on street markets. I had a bit of a street market trader mentality, you might say, in those days. And I just said, look, I think they should get paid, and if you don't agree with me, I think you should go home. That's kind of a short version of it. And he did. He went home. The merchandiser took over, gave them the money every night. And Marshall literally went home and gave my number to a bunch of people in Chicago, in Detroit, in Jersey, in New York. I mean, it was just crazy. And every week someone would call up 10 City, Blaze, Daryl Pandy, a diva. Eventually I made my way to New York and met Judy Weinstein, but it was all through Marshall.
And tell us about the scene in London at that time. Am I right in thinking that the scene was a bit racist, quite a hard scene for these guys to grow through?
Well, I don't know about racist. I mean, there was a lot of racism then, definitely. But the club scene in London was very mixed. It was the time of Shaken Finger Pop, Family Function, Soul to Soul. Everything in London was downbeat. Everybody was into James Brown and funk and early Def Jam. And house music kind of flew right in the face of that. So the early house music gigs, they'd tour the whole country, but they get to London and no one would be there, except for one guy called Patrick King and another guy called Patrick Lilly, who went on to run High on Hope, which for my money is the best club there's ever been. And it was difficult for people to take seriously what was sort of track date music, where they wanted to be sort of more into like the cool downbeat stuff. There was a racist backdrop to the industry then. People who wanted to play live, if they came from the sort of the urban scene or the black music scene, the thing was sing to tape, because we don't really want to give you the money to go on the road with all these musicians. And that was a very difficult era. When we did a diva live with a full band, that was really the first time that any of those acts got to play with real musicians. It was pretty special.
But you were very much pushing underground music that was kind of the underdog, and I think that's something, the early signs of what you would then go on to do.
Yeah, I loved the music. I mean, I didn't really know very much about being an agent. I kind of made it up as I went along, to be honest. I'm not sure if anybody believed that, but it was true. And I would lose acts all the time to these bigger agencies that I didn't really know what they did or who they were, but I would already be on to the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. And I was more interested in working with promoters like Café de Paris and Delirium at the Astoria and the guys up north. Basically, they would ring me up and they'd say, "This act's really happening, get them over." So it was more like we had a network of promoters and I would go get the act over.
And how did you start to build the sort of start of your power base, if you like? At which point was that? Was this the sort of Frankie Knuckles, Morales, Oakenfold kind of era?
I think if there was one moment, it was probably when Big Love happened, which was a rave that happened in the 80s. And at that time, I represented Frankie Knuckles, David Morales, and Paul Oakenfold. And in those days, there were maybe 15 or 20 DJs in the world who had value. So I had a proportion that meant something. And we found out that all the sets had been recorded, and we found out how much money had changed hands. And I think at that point, it was like, okay, time to be a little more serious about what we do. So it started then.
And is that how, I heard that that's how the Paul Oakenfold relationship came about? He didn't really have anybody looking after him.
I actually I met Paul when I was a student. I was trying to get on a mailing list to have records sent to me when I was this very bad DJ. And the guy who answered the phone at Rush Release was this guy called Paul Oakenfold. So very early, we stayed in touch, and when I sort of started at an agency, we spoke. I went to his club Future. He introduced me to the Happy Mondays. It was kind of fun time. But mainly, the reason I got to represent him was he'd done a deal with, I hope this isn't wrong, Pioneer, but I'm sure it was Pioneer, to send him a bit of kit. And he'd had his photo taken, and they displayed the kit. It was an early advert. And then they wouldn't send him the kit, and no one could get him this kit. So he was going on about it. I said, "Give me the paperwork." So I had a look at it, and I sorted it out. And after that, I basically sorted out everything for him.
And at this period, sort of DJ contracts, if you like, were kind of very much, I would imagine, in their infancy, if they existed.
Non-existent.
So did you kind of set the template for what would become contracts. I know Peter Elliott was around at this time.
Yeah.
Evil Eddie Richards, is that right?
Yeah,
His agent?
Eddie Richards and Peter Elliott was definitely around. I think we all tried to be as professional as we could, but not really knowing how far you could stretch something. I think I learned how far I could stretch something when James Barton and Darren Hughes and I got into business with Paul at Cream. That's when contracts started to get quite interesting.
It's so funny you say that, because I remember very much around that time, and you did a very famous photo shoot with Paul Oakenfold at the Chelsea football stadium with James Barton, who's here, and Darren Hughes. And I do remember at the time it being in the contract that Paul had to be at all Chelsea home games. There was some technicality in there.
Let me help you. Wherever he was that afternoon, whatever game, James had to get him to the Liverpool that night. It wasn't the only thing that was in the contract, but it was probably the strangest thing. The interesting thing was that other promoters heard about it, and they would look up the football schedule at the start of the season, and they'd see where Chelsea were playing. And, you know, Jimmy Dean in Newcastle would call me up and go, "Oh, so I've got Oki on the 8th of November then, because I see Chelsea are playing the next day." And that was kind of how we booked his diary for a year or two, basically following the football.
And this relationship with Paul, I think, is really important. Obviously, Maria May, who's also here now, who was your sister, would you call her at the time?
She started off as my slave, if I'm fair, but she very soon proved that she's actually at least as good as me, and some days definitely better.
Okay, we'll come back to that. But you fell out with Paul at once, didn't you, at one point?
Yeah, just the once, actually. I mean, it was funny because everybody tried to split us up. Everybody wanted to sort of get in the middle of what was a very lucrative relationship at the time. And Paul's a deeply loyal person. I mean, you know, demanding like artists can be, but I'm okay with that. But very loyal. We fell out over an internet deal with James Palumbo, and it was the only time it ever happened. But it was like this state secret. I mean, it was like 3 or 4 months, no one knew. We'd be at the same place, and Maria and Paul's partner at the time would engineer it so that we didn't bump into each other and no one knew. It was quite stupid, really. Until eventually our boss at the time, Barry Dickens, who's a big fella if you've ever met him, he got wind of this, and he basically called Paul into the office, sat me and Paul in front of him like 2 naughty schoolboys, and he was like, "You two, sort this out in his office now." Like this, stupid. And, you know, we sort of sheepishly just kind of went, "Okay then, Barry." And, you know, we sort of moved on. But that was the moment where Maria became much more the point person for Paul, because it changed our relationship in a way that didn't affect our friendship, but it did affect our working relationship. And so we both decided there was still a lot of value in that relationship, but it was best if Maria sort of ran it. And I think she took Paul to some substantial heights afterwards.
And again, at this time, ITB were very much the sort of agency of the day, weren't they, at that time, for dance music?
Well, for everything. I mean, they had Nirvana, they had the Smashing Pumpkins, they had, you know, Bob Dylan, Neil Young. Joining ITB for me was like, wow, I'm getting somewhere. You know, I really loved the time I had there.
And were you, am I right to think, you know, people talk about the famous David Levy phone calls that you sometimes get when you get a dressing down on the phone? I've had a few over the years, I must say. Were you quite angry at this time? Quite an angry person at this time?
Was I quite an angry person? Yeah, I think I was, personally and professionally. I think personally, you know, we all have to grow and work through our shit, right? So I was in the middle of that. But professionally, it really did bother me that, you know, no one wanted to be the best they could be. And I don't like that. I don't even like that today. Like, be the best you can be. You only get one shot, really. And I think a lot of really talented people often fail because they might be the best they can be, but the people around them aren't prepared to be. And I've never wanted to compromise on that. It's kind of a core thing for me.
I think, but your kind of reputation was kind of set at that point because of how you were at that time.
Probably. To be fair to me, there was a period where a lot of those promoters were actually drug dealers posing as promoters. And I didn't go to a lot of gigs because I figured if they actually saw that I was this short little fella, they'd actually make good on their threats to break my legs, shoot me, and all the other stuff that I used to get threatened with every day. I mean, every day for about 6 months. So I would just take on this persona on the phone, and for years I would meet people and they're like, you know, you're nothing like I expected. I mean, there was the most normal way I would be greeted for years.
And how do you, well, tell me how many times in the current sort of typical year you would make that famous David Levy phone call?
Since joining WME? Maybe twice a year, not very often. I'm semi-retired on that front. But not fully.
A relief to a lot of people in this room, I think. Let's go back then to ITB, and clearly a huge game changer for electronic music was the moment when you decided to leave ITB after how many years? 10?
13.
13 years. Tell us about how the William Morris arrangement came about and what your feelings were at the time about making such a big leap.
Honestly, it was a very personal decision. I just felt bored. I felt like I wasn't pushing myself. I felt like I wasn't doing as much as I could. And I thought, it's too young to feel that comfortable. You know, I really want a challenge. It wasn't about being unhappy at ITB. You know, I really value all those years and everybody I worked with there. But I needed a challenge. And that challenge could have gone several ways. But the idea of joining a company that was more than about music, that was more than about me or electronic or anything, was a really attractive proposition. And to be given a brief that says, come up with ideas, we'll support them, go investigate things in the world that interest you, and if they're of interest to us, we'll make them happen. And you know, the company is so old; it's 110 years old, and I think the sort of mature attitude they have to entertainment. You know, for someone like me, it was like kid in a candy store. So on that level, it was easy. The actual decision took me 5 long months to make. I mean, I really agonized over it, to be honest.
And in terms of how you decided to bring electronic music into the play there at William Morris, tell us about the idea and the vision you had to create William Morris Electronic Division.
That was Gary Blackburn's fault, really. Hello, Gary. He'd started working with Pete Tong, and I'd known Pete for a really long time. I mean, I'm quite happy about the fact that over all the years, even the DJs and promoters that I didn't necessarily represent, I had good relationships with a lot of people. So I knew Pete, and Gary and Pete were interested in knowing if I'd work with them. And I'd been at William Morris about a year or so, and they specifically didn't want to bring the whole DJ thing, which is kind of part of the reason why it stayed the way it did at ITB. And then one day there was an article in the New York Times about a DJ making, I think it was $50,000 on New Year's Eve for a private party. And this email did the rounds, and it's like, oh, wow, look at that. And I'm thinking, yeah, chump change, what about it? And the phone calls start happening, and they're like, this looks really interesting. And I said, well, yeah, there's a lot of this out there. And they said, oh, we'd really like to start doing this in a proper way, if you could think of a way to do it. And what Maria and I did for 10 years, is very special. I don't think I could ever recreate that atmosphere that we had. So I wanted to do something different. And the sort of correlation of Pete looking for a way to sort of work with me, and me looking for a way to get into electronic, and my views on Pete, which weren't just that he was a DJ, but, you know, one of the greatest A&R executives in dance music's history, certainly the greatest broadcaster in dance music's history. I thought, wouldn't it be more interesting to build a division that combines an actual artist into the sort of management structure? You know, you have that possibility for artists to talk to an artist on a professional level and say, you know, is what they're saying to us a pitch, or is it real? Like, you know, and also have his A&R skills help us find talent, develop talent. And so it sort of came about that way, that circumstances were right. And, you know, he's been a fantastic partner.
And in terms of people that you took with you, you didn't take some of the DJs that you took into ITB. So how was it about leaving people like Paul behind and the Def Mix crew emotionally for you? How did that feel? Oki,
Def Mix, David Guetta, Leon Bushwacker, and others, they all stayed where they needed to stay. They were Maria's clients day to day. We'd set it up that way. I encouraged them to stay. They wanted to stay. I'm still friends with all of them. I think emotionally I miss Frankie Knuckles the most because, this guy played at my wedding. It's like the greatest DJ of all time for me, along with Norman Jay. So emotionally very difficult, but, I fully supported their decision. And I'm so proud of what David Guetta's achieved, and very friendly with him, Kathy, Caroline, Maria, I don't think it really matters where you work. I think relationships are more important than that.
And the sort of global strategy then for William Morris and electronic, you've built a huge roster in a pretty short space of time. 3 years now you've been there, is that about right?
Yeah, the electronic group, yeah.
And how, just tell us a bit about the sort of current vision of where you're going with this. Obviously we're in a very golden period right now for electronic music, and you've got a huge roster that's pretty dominant.
Yeah, according to the competition, we're taking over the world, so I don't know about that. But I think we're just trying to be the best we can be, and we have the resources and the sort of patience to try and build a structure that's global in its sort of potential, but, is hands-on day to day. And I wouldn't say we've got it right yet. We get some of it right, we get some of it wrong. Some of our early decisions strategically were growing pain ones. But ultimately, what we want to do is provide electronic DJ, anybody from the electronic world, the opportunity to work with a group of people all around the world who understand the culture, who are from the culture, who can help them navigate other areas of the entertainment business from that perspective of understanding the culture and build something of value. And, we're going to give it a bloody good try. We may or may not succeed. It's not necessarily only in our hands. But I think the number of artists that have chosen to work with us, a few have left, but very few. Most are staying and more are coming. And I think that's the most evidential thing. And I think also a lot of promoters are starting to understand where we're coming from. And I think I'm enjoying the most positive period of relationships with promoters that I've ever had, which perhaps would surprise some people.
Tell me, there's a lot of smaller agencies out there who do feel very squeezed out by William Morris. There's absolutely no doubt about it. There are people in America and here who feel very threatened by what you're building. How do you respond to that?
I understand them. I was that guy. But I was that guy, and now I'm not that guy. And anybody who wants it can do the same. I just think that's about being determined. All we're doing is trying to raise the ceiling. That's it. We're not saying no one else should be involved. We're not saying we don't believe in feeder arrangements. Joel Zimmerman, who runs the department day to day, he was a small agent. We worked with him alongside him for a year or two. He joined us. Obi Asika, who is the dominant agent in the dubstep and drum and bass scene, he was an independent. He worked alongside us. He decided to join. It's about giving people resources and teamwork. It's not about, I can't worry how other people interpret it, but people who come into it generally like what they see.
You have quite, well, I think it's very well known for people who book artists that you do have big global internal meetings where pretty much there are no secrets really. Everyone's kind of aware of what offers are coming in, and I think a lot of people feel that the bigger you get, you know everything that's going on everywhere. And I think, how do you feel about that? Because I know from people who book talent that they sometimes feel, because you're so big, that everybody knows everything, you can't get good deals anymore, everybody's driving the prices up internally in a company because you're all discussing deals.
I think it's our job to get our clients the best deal possible. But the best deal possible isn't always getting the most money. I think one of my most positive relationships over, a very long time now is Fatboy Slim. And, we make a habit of going and doing shows that are not about money. It's part of how we keep him relevant. I think if you only ever chase an upward curve, you're not going to have a career. Careers don't work that way. Careers do sort of that. You know, they have peaks and troughs. And reinvention is crucial to that. It's certainly more important than money. There's always going to be a moment in an artist's career where, either because they've spent a lot of years or because they have specific circumstances, they need to monetize what they do. There's nothing wrong with that. Promoters do it all day long. They just don't like sharing it with the artists, right? But other than that, I think I'm certainly one who believes in, you know, do a party for the hell of it. I mean, Norman's doing a party in Rome in July. It's 3,000 people. It's invitation only. It's on the beach. It's about giving real clubbers a real party. And, you know, it will be one of the best shows he does all year. I know it. And I think that's really valuable.
How do you find the politics of electronic music today?
Stimulating.
Elaborate.
I like an intellectual challenge. You know, I think I like to step back from the politics. I like to try and understand why someone might think something. I think one of the agents who will sit down with a manager and an artist and try and challenge their own point of view if I think a promoter's right. I think there are promoters in this room who'd confirm that. But, you know, we're a small, even though we're a big business, we're a community. There's lots of people in this room I've known for 20 years. It's going to get political, you know. And like I say...
do you ever get tired of the politics, or do you thrive on it?
I haven't got tired of it lately.
Okay. You talked earlier about how agents are the crossroads into this scene, into pretty much everything. And I think the way that the music industry has changed, you have become, because of the nature of live music, becoming the key source of income. Your strength and your power has become even greater in the last probably 5 years. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know that agents can take the credit for that. I think we're just in the middle of something very human, which is whether technology changes or not and changes the way that music can be manufactured and sold. Technology doesn't change the human experience. And people want to go out. People want to go out if they're pissed off. People want to go out if they're happy. It doesn't really matter what state of mind you're in. There's normally a reason to go and celebrate or commiserate with other people. So the sort of live experience, whether it's in a club or a concert hall, is, I think, fundamental to sort of human social condition. And I think the gap between how well that's doing as we all get better at doing our jobs and the issues that are going on in the technology sort of space make it look even more dramatic. I mean, we're not an industry without problems and issues, of course. You know, we're affected by the economy like everybody, but I think we don't spend vast sums of money to create success. We sort of carve it out gig by gig, and the gigs have to work for the next gigs to come along. You know, so I think those two things together are kind of why we're where we're at. And
about your own personal life, Ibiza was a bit of a late discovery for you.
Yeah, thanks, Norman.
What took you so long to get over here and enjoy Ibiza?
God knows. How stupid was I? I think as a younger person, I had quite strong views about drug culture. I grew up in the punk era. I had friends from school who got very messed up in a really stupid way, and it kind of coloured my view of all cultures around drugs wrongly. And for me, Ibiza was that Ibiza uncovered, you know, whatever. And then I got married, and my wife was from a different culture, and I think I just decided I'm just going to see what this is all about finally. And, you know, fell in love with the place.
And you sort of hang out in a place that people wouldn't expect to see you hanging out in. Tell us about Monday mornings in Ibiza, or Monday afternoons.
Oh, DC-10. I love it.
What do you love about it?
I love everything about it. I love the fact that they care about the people in that club more than they care about anything else. I love the fact that the ticket prices are sane, that the drinks are sane, that you, even if you don't know people's names, you feel like you know everybody in the club. The security is chilled. I mean, it's a proper old-fashioned club, and it's all about music. They play a lot of music that I happen to like. And for me, it's the first club since High on Hope, which I went to in the 80s. It was Norman Jay and Danny D used to run at Dingwalls. It was the first club where I had that same feeling. And I think, you know, no matter how successful some of the artists are that I work with, I think if you lose that feeling of why you would go to a club, what it is that you enjoy about it, like all of those things, I don't think you're as good at your job. I think you become a bit jaded, a bit tired. And it's not like I don't go to the other clubs on the island. You know, I love the Terrace at Pasha. I really love the Terrace at Amnesia. They're all great rooms, space, you know. But DC-10, I think, has a spirit that, for me, I can really relate to.
But you don't actually represent many people from that genre, do you? You never have done. And is there a desire to, or do you just like to go there and switch off and not get involved too much in that side?
As a company, I think we'd like to be more involved in that space. As an individual, I'm less bothered about that. I prefer to find individuals that I can relate to and work with. I think, you know, I want to go and see Ricardo Villalobos and enjoy him. You know, I mean, David Squillaci last season was a revelation to me. And, you know, maybe he'll want to work with me one day, maybe I want to work with him one day, who knows. But for now, it's great to just enjoy it. I mean, you know, with no obligation, no commitment, just to go and know that you're going to enjoy that experience.
As part of the sort of chilling out or the thawing out of David Levy, you talk about the fact that you're mentoring a lot of people at work at the moment, and that must take up a fair amount of your time. Do you, tell us a little bit about that, but also how will you ever lose the desire to be on the phone nailing deals?
Oh, God. Well, to the first part, I do really enjoy training the guys that I get to work with. I've helped a lot of agents people become agents, and I like to think I instill good values in them. At the moment, we've got an amazing bunch at William Morris. You know, Brendan, who we just promoted, was a bugged-out resident. He gave up being a bugged-out resident, you know, because he wanted to be an agent more. And, you know, I want to give that guy as much time as I can. We have Dom Chung going through the same thing. You know, Steve Hogan, when he joined to today, is just such a different person. So I love that aspect, and I love working with a global team. You know, there's Alex in New York and Joel in LA and Sam. It's really great to pass on that knowledge. I think that's something I think that's kind of why I agreed to do today. I don't feel like I need to hold on to anything. I don't think I'm the exclusive arbiter of anything. And I think the more I can share what I know with people around me, then the more likely we'll build a real business that's worth having.
And as a chief architect of this scene, because you are, whichever way you look at it, how do you see, what's your interpretation of electronic music becoming a true global lifestyle now? We're seeing that shift, and I think you guys are poised to capitalize on it.
In some ways, we're already there. We're just not organized about it. I think I made the comment about, you know, hip-hop. We live in a hip-hop world. You know, that whole thing of the 80s, how rap became hip-hop, became the lifestyle. And I think we're going through that. You can see it in fashion. You can see it in advertising. You can see it in mainstream pop stars who use electronic culture to underpin what they do. It's in every aspect of life every day. We should all be getting the rewards of that. You know, anybody who's put 10, 20 years into getting there, why shouldn't you share in that? And I think what William Morris do, like I say, is they have the experience and the maturity to see it from a much higher up perspective, a much sort of broader perspective. And so now we can talk about how to take electronic culture into film, into television, into, you know, lifestyle branding, into even books. You know, whatever area it can go, there are now people in my own office. I can walk down the corridor and have all those conversations at the highest level. And only a few of those things need to click, and I think other people will do the same, and other people are doing the same. Look at Daft Punk. They just scored Tron. You know, they're blazing a trail all of their own. So I think we already do live in a world that is dominated by electronic lifestyle. I just think sometimes we're a little bit shy about that. We don't need to be.
I want to go back to money briefly. Last night, when I was in a restaurant, I texted a few key people who are probably all in this room to send me some. What was the question you always wanted to ask David Levy but were scared to ask him? And I got a couple of unprintable ones, which I'm not going to repeat them. But there was a funny one, but it said, David, when are you going to retire so that we can all finally make some money?
Gee, Martin, I wonder who asked that one. Well, I got a house to pay off here, so it ain't going to be anytime soon. I actually have never particularly exploited, I mean, it's a little known fact, but I could have owned a very big piece of a couple of big electronic companies along the way, and I've always turned it down. I'm a bit of a purist at heart. I have a very nice lifestyle. I do very well, but I don't pursue that unless it's for my clients.
And you've never wanted to go independent yourself? It's never been a thought process when you were looking at the William Morris option?
Well, I was independent when I was younger, and it was a thankless task. I mean, you just wake up in the middle of the night thinking how you're going to pay the cleaner that week. And I really understand smaller agencies and smaller individual agents looking at us and sort of, I don't know, whatever feeling they have. I have been there. I've had years of feeling like that. So for me, I kind of feel that's done for me.
And one of the other questions I got was, which artist do you wish you had got that you didn't get? Somebody you went for and you lost out to them?
Wow. That's a difficult question. I normally get one.
It was asked by quite a difficult man, actually.
I guess I regret the fact that the relationship I had with Luciano didn't pan out. It didn't. And that's a shame, because I think he's an amazing guy.
What happened there?
It's not for the room. But I do respect a lot of those guys. I'm not sure that I can make a difference to people like Ricardo and Lucien, and I have so much respect for what they do musically, it almost gets in the way of me being able to help. Otherwise, I think it would probably be an artist from history that I admire, rather than someone who's out there today. I'm very lucky, I work with some truly extraordinary artists.
I was going to say, who would you say, I think I know the answer, but which artist do you kind of most value that you work with and feel that you've made the biggest contribution to?
Well, on the basis that hopefully the rest of my clients don't fire me for picking three, there are three artists who've really been with me the whole journey at this point, and I love them to bits. Norman Cook, Fatboy Slim, who's without doubt the nicest human being in this business, such a gentleman. And I really feel like the relationship I've had with him and Gary has been so fruitful in so many ways. And then Massive Attack, they're just great guys, and they really let me do what I want, which is amazing. And I think they're sort of so iconic. And then I guess last but definitely not least, Bjork, who's easily the most creatively fulfilling relationship I've had. Literally to be given absolute creative freedom to shape her tours and touring the way that I get to, it's helped me in so many other ways. I've learned so much. Most importantly, it learnt me there isn't anything you can't achieve if you want it. I mean, she's utterly uncompromising, and we've pulled off some pretty insane things. And that has definitely filtered into every other artist I've worked with, because I'm up for it.
Is that an important part of the William Morris setup, in that you're working with people like Taylor Swift, for instance, and Gaga? Do you learn from these people? Are you taking principles of how these people operate into electronic music?
I think it goes both ways. I mean, Taylor Swift is hard to explain in the context of this discussion, but you know, it's great to work with artists from Nashville. People here probably wouldn't understand that I actually have a Nashville thing going on, but I do. Gaga, well, she's just the zeitgeist right now, and it's just great to be part of it in any way. But I think what I know helps them. I mean, bringing Gaga to Ibiza, you know, that was me giving them something. What she then did when she got here was her giving everybody else something. It's a two-way street. It's nice to find ways to do things in a different way. I do enjoy that challenge.
Okay, and before we hand over for a couple of questions, I mean, you seem to be a much mellower man. You seem to be in a good spot. Tell us how you feel, you know, in the moment now, working at William Morris with the scene the way it is. Having a son, you know, put a lot of things in perspective. Having an amazing son, 6 years old now. So that really, you know, that and my marriage and everything, that my personal life is something I'm very happy in. And Ibiza is a big part of that. You know, I'm proud to say I live here now at least some of the year. And professionally, well, this might sound odd, but I just feel like I'm just getting started, to be honest. That's a very scary way to end. Okay, fantastic. So I'd like to get a couple of questions from the floor just to see what random thoughts we get. And I'm not controlling these questions in any way.
Uniqueness. I'm always looking for what's unique about someone. What do I see that I don't see somewhere else? And that's just something that I've always sort of strove to find. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but I've never tried to represent lots of people all in the same field. I think that's pointless. One of the key things for me is when I meet any artist, the very first question I ask myself is, can I make a difference? If the answer to that question is no, it doesn't matter how successful or great they are, I'm the wrong guy. Because I kind of need to be part of that process. I'm not a kind of more of a mechanic, if you like. There are agents who are sort of mechanically very brilliant, sort of much more numbers-based, much more sort of more legal business kind of approach, which is totally valid. Me, I like to be more involved in the process of why they're going to have a journey.
Okay, another one. See, everybody else is scared now.
David, so I think we
James.
all pretty much know how much of a good agent you are. My question to you would be the following. Do you think you'd be a good promoter?
Okay. Well, I wasn't a bad partner as a promoter, was I? I think not. I think it takes a certain amount of entrepreneurial skill and nerves of steel to risk money the way people like you do every day. I'm glad I've done it. I'm glad I learned what that feels like. It made me a better agent. It made me more sympathetic to promoters when they were genuinely losing money, not just saying it what they were and it was someone else's money all along, which happens. But I think it's a whole different skill set, and much as I like to be creative, I don't think I'm particularly entrepreneurial, and I think you have to be entrepreneurial to be a good promoter, you know. So, no, nothing to worry about there.
Okay, one more question.
Hi there, Greg, promoter from Dubai. I just want to see what your thoughts are on the whole prices going up for DJs over the next year. Because it seems like the trend is that it's going up and up at quite a crazy rate. Are you seeing that across the board?
I hear of pricing for some DJs that does surprise me, but I'm not involved in the intimate details of why they would value themselves in that way. At the end of the day, there's a very simple equation you can do. How many people walk through the door at a certain ticket price? Do you make that money? And if you do, there's a fair argument about how much of it the DJ should get, or the group of DJs should get. In the rock and roll business, it's not a conversation. It's a fact. An artist will get between 85 and 90% of the net available income. Okay? And no one debates it. It's been that way for a number of years. There's an uneasy relationship between DJs and promoters because they actually can't exist without each other. It actually started that the first, when I think back to Nicky Holloway and Paul Oakenfold doing the trip at the Astoria, blimey, Pete Tong was there. The fact is, it was the combination of promoter and DJ that made the party. I guess what happened is people like me got in the middle of that and polarized things. And, there's definitely some negativity to that. It's not all good, right? But I think you have to be prepared. I mean, I definitely had a conversation with one of our most successful DJs who had to change his position on this island. And we actually advised him to take less money at the request of the club. He took less money at the request of the club. And everybody moved forward. And I'm not afraid of that. I think at the end of the day, it's a bit of a gold rush right now. There are lots of people throwing money at people, and it's very hard for people to sort of say no. I'm good at saying no, but not everybody is. And so what happens is you get these sort of little bubbles where a few people throw silly numbers out, then everybody else has got to have the silly number, because it's very tribal, and so if this DJ hears that this guy got this, And actually, it's the worst thing for an agent is to get that phone call. I just heard that so-and-so got 300 million thousand pounds. Oh, fuck. Then you got to make the call. Hey, James, guess what? Right? And there's a really great phrase that I'm not going to repeat, but if you put it in your contract, you're always protected. If you want to learn what it is, go do some law. But I think in the end, promoters or DJs or agents who overly inflate their ticket price, their fee, anything like that, you won't be around very long. I mean, you just won't. Or you will, but you'll have to come down from where you are. And careers and longevity are about surviving, not about killing it in a single moment. And maybe people don't think I really feel strongly about that, but I do. And much as I'm as guilty as anybody at hiking the prices of people, that's me, I like to think that we choose our battles wisely. Most of the artists I've represented a really long time, I still represent, and they're still doing well. So I kind of use that as my barometer. Good question, by the way.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I think we'd all like to go on a bit longer, but David Levy, thank you very much. Great conversation.
Thank you.